Hello, it's Lydia from Hen Hill Cut Flowers. Welcome to the latest episode. Glad you could join me. So, feedback from the last episode, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was a little bit too much chat about chickens and not enough about the actual flowers. So, brace yourselves, strap yourselves in as well. We're going straight into the flowers. No waffly preamble whatsoever. So, what have I sold since last episode? I'm delighted to tell you that I've sold absolutely diddly squat. Not a single stem. I haven't been supplying any weddings since I spoke to you last. Lots of things are not doing their best on the field at the moment, and I don't like putting anything out there that's not perfect. I don't have enough dahlias at the right stage to put a bucket together for the hub either. So big fat zero. It is quite a quiet time of year anyway. It's not just that I'm terrible at sales and marketing, to be fair to myself. Lots and lots of people in my area are away on school holidays. We're in the last sort of few weeks of school holidays at the moment, and we've also got GCSE results day coming out on Thursday. So people's minds are elsewhere. Not a massively busy time for weddings, and it was quiet this time last year as well. So I'm not too worried about it. It's not the best, obviously, but I think just quite honestly, just having plants alive on the field at the moment feels like a huge achievement. Like I'm celebrating the fact that nothing has, well, actually, I think a couple of astrantias have snuffed it. But apart from that, everybody else is still just about alive, to be honest. And that excites me enormously right now. I have been out harvesting seed. I knew the rain was coming. As soon as I made that pampas grass cloud, which you may or may not have seen on my Instagram, pretty much guarantees that rain is going to come and ruin it. We've had the tiniest little dribble this morning, and what I've actually been doing is carrying on with the watering as normal, obviously, and making sure that the soil is nice and moist without going too crazy with the water that I've got stored, because what I don't want to happen is when the rains actually come. And I must say, I was pretty convinced we were going to have some kind of apocalyptic downpour and it would just wash all the soil on my slope away. Judging by the forecast, it's going to come in tiny dribs and drabs, which is obviously disappointing because we do desperately need rain right now, but we also don't need a complete deluge. So I'm trying to keep the surface of the soil moist and mulched. As you know, I'm obsessed with mulching, so that when the rains do come, it's not going to just wash everything away. So I've been busy trying to get as much harvested as I possibly can for this autumn sowing that I'm trying this year. I've got a surprising amount of seed, actually, possibly because I didn't sell as much of some things as I planned to. Now, you'll remember I was growing agrostemma, and that was like the one crop. Well, no, I'm being harsh on myself. There are a couple of crops that have done really well, but agrostemma wasn't unexpectedly, oh, this has done well for me. It was a brand new crop. I'd never grown it before, didn't have a clue what I was doing. Managed to get the spacing pretty spot on. Could have gone closer, but I was expecting the plants to bulk up a little bit more than they actually did. Got them netted on time and the netting stayed up. So I had these beautiful plants, looked amazing, and the timing of them, it just didn't work out. So I did a whole bed of them. I had about 5-6 sessions, I think. So they sort of flowered in this wonderful left to right direction, and they were amazing, but they didn't actually manage to tie in with everything else. And again, volume has been, or lack of, has been a real issue for me this year. I thought I'd done so much, and I had this spreadsheet and it was telling me I'd done like 3,000 of this, and it was all pretty crazy. And then by the time you filter everything down and get it on the field and get it flowering, the volumes just weren't what I had budgeted for, or planned for rather. And so I just didn't seem to have enough volume of any one thing at any one point. Hence, I have ended up with quite a bit of seed. Now, I've also got lots of Orlia as well. Sorry, got lots of agrostemma. We know that. I've got lots of Orlia as well. And that is because I sold all the self-sown stuff. No problems with that at all. Lovely tall stems. Very impressed with that. All in silly places, but it didn't matter. But I had gone quite big on my own sown stuff. And by the time that got through the trauma of the coldest, wettest April ever, and then the trauma of May, it all came up really, really short, and it was just no good for anything. So I've left it in situ. left all the seeds to ripen, and then removed everything yesterday and bagged it all up and labelled it all up. I have still got to do the sweet peas. And what I think I'm going to do, actually, because it'll be quicker, is just pull the whole plants down and then put them all on a table and rifle through them. I think that'll just be a bit easier. So everything is going into bags at the moment with post-it notes for labels, and then they will get put into a kind of not cold storage per se, but they'll get put into dry bags, which will be put somewhere dark so that nobody can eat them and they don't go moldy or anything like that. The drought has continued, apart from this tiny little splatter of rain that we had this morning. Temperatures have dropped, but then having said that, yesterday was like 28 degrees, then it just felt really, really hot. And just because we haven't had any rain, we've just had nothing to sort of cool the ground down. And if you're somebody that ever cools their greenhouse by pouring loads of water in it onto the floor, you'll know that the increase in humidity drops the temperature. It's a really good technique. And I must say, I've been lightly misting my walkways and everything at home, just because I'm really feeling quite sorry for all the insects and everybody that's buzzing around. It's not that I want a million slugs to come back, but I do feel incredibly sorry for the smaller wildlife. The bird baths are all full and everybody can go and climb into a bird bath, but that's not quite the same if you're a really small insect or you're a fly or a wasp or something. They need just to be able to hop down on the ground and absorb moisture. So I say I've just been putting like a light misting, nothing wildly extravagant, and can't use a hose pipe obviously, but it definitely just helps. Also helps enormously just to drop the temperatures. So on the field, I've got some plants that are doing really well right now. The statice is absolutely stunning, and today I put a short reel on Instagram of me holding one of my massive bunches of statice. It's just performed really well this year. I've grown I didn't grow two different types. I grew one type, which was leftover seed from last year, which was this kind of apricot-y, pinky colour, and it was very nice, a little bit short, but it was lovely. And then the second lot of statice, I actually was given them as plugs from the local plant nursery where I do all that hanging basket making in May. And the owner's a fantastic grower, and she's got a lady that works with her, and they are just superb growers. And the quality of these plants has been really quite exceptional. They obviously got a very good start because they were grown into proper professional quality compost, and I don't know exactly what seeds they were, what variety they were, but they have come up beautifully. Very nice tall stems, and just the intensity of the dark purple it's just taken my breath away. It's been amazing. It's really, really stunning. Not a huge amount of demand for them. They've been on the hub for a couple of weeks, and they just haven't been the right flower at the right time for the florists that were on there purchasing. So I have cut them, and I'm probably going to dry them because I think that colour will dry particularly well. Now, the Aster Flamingo at Sunset buds are just starting to open. I can't wait to see what these guys are like. These are actually planted adjacent to the statice, which is adjacent to the zinnias and the Dahlias. So they're all in a bed, the lower part of the field. They're in bed 4. It got cleared out of nettles earlier on in the season. My other half and I dug them out by hand. It was quite a painstaking task. And so the soil was really super in there, like a huge contrast between the soil at the top of the slope where there weren't any nettles, because nettles are just a wonderful plant for the soil, and they just sort of leave it absolutely full of nitrogen as well. And so these particular plants, the statice, the Dahlias, the asters, and the zinnias, are all in this new bed, and they seem to be doing very, very well. The rose lilies smell incredible. They are not good enough quality to sell. And again, a volume issue. Really was meant to be more of an experiment this year. I didn't buy very many. They're terribly expensive per bulb. I'm just glad they didn't get eaten, to be honest, after all the tulip and allium bulb disasters in the spring. So I'm just kind of watching them and enjoying what they do. I don't think I would grow them again on any kind of scale. I would just keep them for myself because they're very beautiful. And I've got them in a corner at home. So when you go round, the scent kind of collects in this corner. And so you just get hit by this blast of lily, which some people love it, some people hate it. I happen to love it. So it's absolutely gorgeous around there. And the eucalyptus is also growing great guns, I guess, because it's just loving this heat and the dryness. I'm very impressed with that. The roses are growing a lot. Definitely with hindsight, wish I watered them more during the earlier part of the drought. I have talked about this before, this kind of tough love policy that I have. And certainly with shrubs, I put them in, and the perennials, put them in, give them a really good water. And they just, generally speaking, they get on with it. I don't like to pamper stuff. I don't like having soft plants. They just have to kind of get on with it. But that system obviously backfired on me slightly in a drought, because I just kept assuming that the rain would come at some point. Like it genuinely did not enter my head that we would have a drought worse than the 1976 one. And that, if you live in the UK, is like the benchmark for all significant events. It's 1976 drought is like the massive thing. And it just did not occur to me that 2026 would be worse than that. I didn't live through the 76 one, but it is like a legend of its own. So mistakes were made there. I was not kind enough to the roses early on in the season, and bless them, they all flowered, and I let them flower because I wanted to see the blooms and just reassure myself that what I'd purchased was actually what had flowered. And so I did let them flower. And they obviously put so much energy into that. They didn't grow very much. But since I've deadheaded them all after the flowering, they have finally got their skids on and they're starting to grow now, and I'm watering them. So I have a plan to underplant them this autumn. I'm obviously going to have to put some horse manure down, and I'm going to have to put some of my own compost down to boost the soil and enrich it so it's a much better environment for them. But I'm thinking about underplanting them, because what I'm seeing about the rose beds is that they look very nice and tidy. There's just literally double rows of roses in them. Wish I'd staggered them. I don't know what happened with that. It looks like I started at the very beginning and then completely just didn't. So there's just these straight lines of roses. And then they've got a really nice thick bark mulch under them. And then absolutely nothing else. And this looks like a real point of weakness to me. I don't know why I didn't realize what I was doing in November last year. They need some companion plants. Now, there used to be this rule that dahlias don't like anything at their feet and they can't cope and all the rest of it. But roses are one of the hardiest shrubs you can get. They are tough as old nails. Like I was going to say you could strim them to the ground and they'll come back. But that is just tempting fate, isn't it, with all the strimming accidents that I've had on the field? Not ones I've done myself, by the way, but if you've listened to previous episodes, you'll know what I'm talking about. But having read what I've read about the soil and the work that all of these individual plants do in contributing to the ecosystem, in feeding the bacteria, in working together with the mycorrhizal in the soil to do all this exchange of nutrients. I'm really thinking that I want to fill up the soil underneath these roses to have this wonderful, wonderful reciprocal ecosystem going on, where they're all feeding each other, they're all helping each other. It just looks far too sparse to just have the rose roots in and the bark mulch on top. So I've got a plan. I want to put something under them that is going to enjoy the conditions that the roses like, because the roses are the priority. All of the conditions are going to be right for them. So there's no point putting a drought tolerant plant in there, something that would rather be dry. So, lavender or anything like that. So I'm going to put in something that's as tough as old boots and that I have a lot of, and therefore it's free. And that is hardy geraniums. They they seem to really love me, and it is kind of reciprocal in that I love them as well, but they get completely out of hand in my experience. They just grow an awful lot. I have masses of the things, and they're very tough. You can almost just, well, they've lived through a drought with not very much water. They take up a lot of space, so they're shading the soil as well. And I just get the feeling that if they're as busy above the ground, I imagine that they're super busy under the ground as well. So I'm thinking about transplanting all of the excess that I have at home and taking them up to the field, see how they get on. The other plants that do really well underneath roses is Nepeta, the catmint. They're just it's a lovely colour combination. There's something about the pale bluey mauvey colour of Nepeta that sits really, really well with roses, with either the pink ones or the white ones or the yellow ones. It's a great combination. Now, if I can get hold of some cheap Nepeta, I mean, I don't mind putting some cheap 9 centimetre plants in there, but otherwise I don't want to be buying expensive perennials just to put them as ground cover. So I think the hardy geraniums is going to be the answer to that. Now, dahlias. After my whole revelation that I'd been pruning my dahlias all wrong, I've decided not to do any more disbudding now for the rest of the season. I'm literally just going to go and let them do what they want for the rest of the year. My new varieties that I bought this year from Dahlia Beach are doing absolutely fine, and a couple of them are flowering. But of course, the plants are small. In fact, all of the dahlias are smaller this year than in 2025 because of the conditions. So I was looking back at some photos to see what the plot looked this time last year, and it did look amazing, like compared to how it looks this year. And it's not really from just from a drought perspective. I just had all sorts of random stuff. It was a little bit more scattergun approach last year. It was very piecemeal. I just kept adding crops in all over the place. And so you'd sort of have a group of something and then a group of something else, and then I'd tack something else on at the end. And it just looked like there was a lot going on. And I have tried to be a bit more professional this year and just have everything much neater, in rows, in groups, where they're supposed to be, and not have it all over the place. And actually looking at the photos, I think I'd quite like to go back to the whole mixed situation. It was certainly more interesting to look at. It was just really lovely. This year's just looking far too professional. I'm not sure I like it. Anyway, the point being, the dahlias last year were about 4.5, 5 foot tall. They were incredible structures. And the funny thing was that I didn't stake them properly last year. Like my mentor, Richard Bailey, told me how to do all the staking. And he uses 3 bamboo canes per plant with string around to support them. I can't get bamboo canes in my soil, even in a good year, never mind a bad year. That's why I use road pins and hammer them in with the big smacky thing, because I can't work with bamboo canes. The soil is just not the right soil to have them in. You can't get them down far enough because there's all the chalk down there. So I didn't net things properly last year. I just had road pins at the ends of the row and then string holding everything up. And it was all a bit of a, it was just a bit of a car crash, really. And there was just leaning dahlias, and the growth was just so phenomenal. They kind of swamped each other and their neighbours. They swamped the rows. They grew everywhere. But most of all, they were just really tall. And these year's guys are about 3 foot tall. Huge difference. So, of course, this year, not realising that everything was going to grow short in the drought, I went out there, bought a whole box of road pins, bought all of this netting, painstakingly staked them all when they were about 1.5 foot tall, which took me quite a long time, actually, because it's not staking is new for me, and I'm still getting the hang of it, and it is a little bit fiddly. I've got the hang of it now, but it just took me a while to stake and net all of the dahlias. And of course, with hindsight, I didn't need to bother. So where I've saved myself cost of production costs this year with the dahlias by leaving them in the ground over winter, I'd then completely blown the budget by the cost of the road pins, the netting, and my labour to stake them all. And the reality this year is that I could have got away with not staking any of them because they haven't grown big enough. So, you live and learn, swings and roundabouts, but very frustrating. Of course, if I hadn't staked them, my cost of production would have been lower and it would have increased the profit margin. There we go. Now, the Echinacea white ones, I sowed a tray of these in the spring and they're actually big enough to go out, but I'm going to wait until we've had some rain and the soil has softened up. I'm very pleased with them. Very, very cute little plants. A good idea, I think, to be sowing perennials every year just so that I can increase the stock of what I've got on the field, which reminds me I should do some more of Achillea the Pearl because that really is the most superb perennial. If you haven't grown it before, it's lovely, spreads around a bit like Achillea normally does with those underground rhizomes that kind of wander off everywhere. But the flowers are a bit like feverfew, so very, very nice, long, thin stems as well. Just lovely, very, very pretty. I had a question about what 2027 is going to look like for me if I'm not doing spring annuals in terms of the order of what flowers are going to be coming through, not what I'm going to be doing with my time. I'd love to say I'll be on a beach somewhere, but I won't be. So it's going to start the season with the self-sown annuals. So everything that's sown in August, September time, well, we're looking at September now, aren't we? That is going to be the first thing that flowers. They come up nice and early, lovely tall stems again, and that the season is then going to progress on to things like the roses, and then the perennials are going to form the bulk of the summer flowers. Then the dahlias should kick in and they take me into autumn, followed hopefully by another flush of roses. That is roughly how I'm thinking that next year is going to work out. What I won't be doing, of course, is the crazy spring sowing of annuals in the greenhouse. So I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out yet, and it might be a mistake, but I think it's worth trying for one season at least, just to see what difference it makes to how the field looks, how my how my brain operates, the kind of spring that I can have next year if I don't do it the conventional way. And if we end up having another monster year of heat and drought next year, it's, a terrible mistake to have spring sown annuals up there anyway. So it's just not worth doing it. So it's also going to be a smaller number of different varieties, as in not growing too much, which does at this point feel a little bit riskier. But what I'm hoping to get is larger volumes of what I do have so I can supply more to the florists. So this is my top tip of the week, actually. Now, you know that I sell wholesale to wedding and event florists, and that is the path, the sales channel that I decided I want to go down. And what I would say to you as a year two grower at the moment is really don't grow too many different varieties when you're starting out. Concentrate on having a greater volume of one type of flower. Now, every professional flower grower will tell you this. Every course you go on will tell you this. And I heard it all, wrote it all down, made a mental note of it, and then totally ignored it. And I was talking you through all of my spring sown annuals, and you'll know that I was going to be really ruthless and stick to about 12. And then I ended up with about 19. Definitely do not do this. I spent all of spring making and updating that epic spreadsheet, which I was talking you through, full of notes about what each individual annual needed in terms of, was it, what sort of daylight hours did it like, how it needed to be pinched, or, whether it was going to fall over in the wind or if you looked at it or any of that. And I never looked at that again. Never looked at that since. Here is the thing. Even if you grow everything perfectly, this is what I've learned. Flowers will flower at slightly different times. So to get a bucket of 30 stems, you need more plants than you think you do, because they won't all be doing the right thing at the right time on the actual day that you want to cut them. And this is the thing I hadn't factored in. I thought my volumes were going to be good enough, but they weren't, because I had too many different varieties. So the volumes of each variety, consequently, were slightly reduced. And if I'd just done 5 varieties, so maybe the agrostemma, the orlia, snaps, status, and zinnia, for argument's sake, I could have done enormous quantities of each crop successioned, so that would have been spread out over the course of the season, rather than growing 19 varieties and therefore much smaller numbers for each variety. So please take the advice that professional growers, and I don't include myself in that because I'm only year 2, but I'm just telling you as a year 2 person, I would definitely grow much smaller, maximum 5. I'm going to have to stick to that next year, varieties, and therefore have the increased volume. Because there is nothing worse than having a florist saying, oh, I want as many of these as you got, and you go out and you realize that some of them peaked a couple of days ago, some of them are going to peak a couple of days after the event, and you just don't have the volume that people are asking you for. Right, well, that's everything that I wanted to talk to you about tonight, actually. I hope you have a lovely rest of the week. Come back and join me for the next episode on Friday. There will be a plant profile as usual. There may even have been a little bit of rain. Have a great rest of the week. Catch you Friday. All the best.